So good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, wherever you are. My name is Mac Manning, and I'm with GW's Military and Veterans Services Office. Thank you again very much, those of you who are tuning in to join us for our Veteran Speaker Series. The Veteran Speaker Series is a speaker series and a conversation regarding members of the military affiliate community, and specifically members of GW's military affiliate community, talking about veterans issues, veterans concerns, and all things related to the military affiliate community and their constituents. So today we have a very special guest to talk about the Pat Tillman Foundation, Rachel Wilcox, who's GW's 2020 Pat Tillman Fellow. But for those of you who are interested in learning more about the Veteran Speaker Series, we invite you to reach out to Military and Veteran Services Office anytime with any questions. We are looking for more individuals that want to participate in the Veteran Speaker Series, and we've decided that we're going to continue this series going into the spring semester and likely through the summer. So start off, thank you very much, Rachel, for joining me. This will be a very quick conversation. But and those of you, you and I actually know each other pretty well because I chaired the committee for the review process for the Pat Tillman Fellow, which GW is a university partner school. But if for the larger audience, do you mind sort of giving us a quick introduction, but also telling us your military affiliation?
Yeah, no, not at all. And thank you for the introduction. So I'm Rachel Wilcox, and I'm a military spouse. My husband is a senior master sergeant in the Air Force. So for other branches, that's E8. And he has about 4 years to go before he retires. Not like we're counting down or anything, but that is my military background.
Cool. How has, obviously one thing that we talk about within GW is military affiliated is a holistic term. And within military veteran services, we've really focused on this aspect of being inclusive. And we look at veterans, dependents, veterans and reservists and National Guard, but also being a dependent, being holistically inclusive of that, because you serve too in a lot of capacity. You make a lot of sacrifices being part of that family.
Mm-hmm.
How has your husband being a service member impacted you personally and then also academically?
Yeah, largely it's been positive, but definitely not without its obstacles. I feel like as a spouse specifically, there are definitely a few times where it can feel like a thankless job. It can be difficult to try to set out, academic and career plans, and only to then be told that you'll be going somewhere completely different and all of those plans have changed. And now you're going somewhere where you don't know anyone and you don't have any job lined up or any school plans. So it can be challenging, but I don't think I would be where I am today without those experiences. So for that, I'm grateful. In my case, the more I got involved with the military, especially within the healthcare system, I feel like the more I was able to really recognize kind of where my strengths were and also where my interests lied, and where I could best serve patients to make a positive change. So I feel like that was positive. I would say.
Like I said, there's positive, negatives with everything, but it's being a part of that. I feel like the dependent part of the military field can be the most forgotten about because we don't necessarily think about that. So it's an important thing that us as members of the military field don't forget about those and don't leave them out. You sort of touched on it, but what sort of program of study are you focused on at GW, and why did you go to that degree of focus?
So I'm in the Doctor of Physical Therapy program in the School of Medicine and Health Sciences at GW. My goals for after finishing this program is to become a licensed physical therapist and try to commission into the Air Force. I feel like I could best serve the military community at large, with both active duty members, but also with their dependents and veterans just within physical therapy itself. So that's the plan so far.
Hey, so it seems like you can't get that away from the Air Force. If your husband's going to be getting out, you're going to be getting out. What was your transition to GW like, being in that program?
It wasn't bad. I was fortunate to complete a master's degree online prior to GW.
Okay.
So I feel like I had a good understanding of like a graduate workload. I would say the biggest challenge for me was trying to relate to some of my peers who were either just coming out of uh, college or maybe had only worked a year in between school programs. I felt like it was a little hard to relate to that, just being in a completely different place in life, being a little bit older, having like familial responsibilities, having a mortgage, like having several years of work experience. I feel like that was kind of the biggest obstacle that I faced in the transition itself. But really, I feel like being involved in the military actually taught me a lot of really helpful things to transition back into school, namely just trying to embrace challenges and expect constant change and then empower myself with information. And that attitude has served me well thus far.
Nice. One thing that's notable is that, for at GW specifically, the data shows that our average age of our typical undergraduate within the MBS community is 27. That's vastly different than, a 19, 18, 19-year-old freshman. And then for grad school, it's about 34, which is probably a lot closer than we realize, but that's still, you're going to have a lot of discrepancies with the different individuals. I know when I was just graduating undergraduate, it would have been very difficult for me to relate to myself today. And, that's the same person. So clear differences and sort of, I guess the one thing commonality you have is you're kind of in the program together, which is nice. But I do want to get into, and the reason we brought you in today was you are the 2020 Pat Tillman Fellow selection for GW. We've had as many. George Washington University is a university partner school for the Pat Tillman Foundation. They're a terrific organization in the memory of Pat Tillman, who lost his life in Afghanistan and tragically left it was a really amazing story, leaving the NFL to go join the armed forces. And one thing that I think is really unique about GW being university partners, we've had as many as 3 fellows, and then now, this year you're all lonely by yourself. But every single person that applies has this amazing story. And reading the application is one of the more rewarding parts of my job. Can you talk a little bit about what the application process for Pat Tillman was like, and just go into your experience with it?
Sure. So I found out about the Pat Tillman Scholarship well before I even had plans to go to GW. It was just a foundation that I was familiar with, and I was familiar with Pat Tillman's story. So I always thought that was really cool and something that I could relate to in terms of a community that valued, continued learning and service beyond self. So I had applied when the application period opened February 1st and submitted my application in February. There was a waiting period until I think mid-May when I found out that I had advanced to the next round and would be considered for an interview. And then about a week later, I found out I had an interview. So I was able to Zoom with the admissions committee, which was a first for that type of group setting interview. And then I want to say about 4 weeks later, I had received a call from MBS that I had received it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So one of the things about it is it's incredibly competitive, and I sort of mentioned there's a lot of great stories that come into it. For many of the students that apply, I recommend they apply multiple times. We sort of talked about this in the beginning before we came onto this interview, but if you're someone who's looking to apply for this program, I recommend getting in your application and your first year, and sometimes it does take a few tries and refining that application a little bit, because you are going against a lot of incredible people, and your story is just as important, and we want to give everyone a really solid look. If you can talk a little bit, you went through that process, you fought through it, you were really successful, and you were selected. What does it mean to you to be a Pat Tillman Scholar?
That's a hard question because it's an incredibly amazing community of individuals. And I definitely always have these feelings of imposter syndrome when I am talking with a lot of members of that community. But for me, it just means that There's a group of individuals who are dedicated to your pursuits to be a lifelong learner, and recognizing that in order to solve problems, you kind of have to be comfortable with not always having the right answer.
Hmm.
And you have to be okay with seeking creative ways to find solutions to problems and asking for help and looking at issues from a multidisciplinary approach.
So I guess you mentioned a lot of what it means, and that's a very difficult question. If you had to give someone who might be interested in looking into the Pat Tillman and possibly putting their name forward and applying for the fellowship, if you could give one piece of advice to yourself if you were going to go through it again, what would that be?
I guess I would say don't be afraid to tout your accomplishments, but also don't be afraid to kind of talk about your weaknesses too. Part of being a lifelong learner is knowing that you have faults, and if you can find ways to turn those faults into strengths, that's the best way you can move forward to kind of creatively approach issues. And that's kind of what the foundation is looking for. And also, just don't be afraid to ask for help, and know that it might take a few tries to go through the selection process, and that's not a reflection on you as an individual. It's just it is very competitive, and the foundation is looking for you to move forward with purpose, not perfection. So just continue to reach out, get input, be open to constructive feedback, and then use those strengths and really embrace that to reflect your application.
So, Rachel, I have one more really difficult question, and then that's going to be it. One thing that's apparent to me in terms of the values of the Pat Tillman Foundation, and when you're reading these incredible applicants and then you're meeting all the fellows that are selected, they're looking for people that are going to change the world, whether that be big or small. And even, I guess, changing the world is never small, but, some people are going to have a very large impact, and some people are doing things that are very small and detailed. And I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. It's really going to have a dramatic effect long term. What are some of the ways with your degree that you plan to, quote, change the world with, and put your impact as a fellow? I know that's a very difficult question.
Yeah, I agree. That is an extremely difficult question, especially for someone who had difficulty trying to figure out what to have for lunch an hour ago. Um, for me, I like to approach things systematically. So, again, approaching things on a small individual level. What can I do myself to impact others around me? So, I'm going into healthcare. So, the first thing that I can do is to really engage in reflective practice, reminding myself to check my biases at the door, and kind of be open to acknowledging there are different social determinants of health that can impact like a patient's attitude that day, and really be aware of all of those to kind of identify where I'm excelling with patients and where I'm not excelling with patients, and then also kind of empowering them to gain more information on their condition or prognosis or whatever it may be, and really inspire them to be their own advocates. So kind of starting on an individual level, but it can work up systematically. And then even just using those same principles and trying to teach that to other healthcare providers. If you teach other healthcare providers to have similar approaches, you can affect a larger community as a whole.
Well, I think it's no doubt that any positive impact is going to have a ripple effect that keeps going and keeps going. So, but anyway, thank you so much, Rachel, for being with me. And thank you to all of those who have tuned in to our Veteran Speaker Series. On behalf of myself, Mac Manning, I'm the program manager of GW's Military and Veteran Services, and all the staff at Military Veteran Services. We want to thank you, Rachel, and thank everyone for tuning in. Please join us for the remainder of the Veterans Month, which is taking place from November 9th to November 28th, where we will be doing different Veteran Speaker Series and also different special initiatives and programmatic efforts to address and really appreciate all the different sacrifices and all the service that all members of the military field community have provided. So again, thank you very much, Rachel, for joining me. I really appreciate everyone taking the time out of their day. Mac Manning signing out.